There is a subtle tension in ordinary moments that often goes unnoticed. While the world moves predictably, the inner self experiences a quiet dissonance. Days are filled with routine, yet each day feels a little hollow, as if life is happening around rather than within. Conversations are had, emails answered, responsibilities met. But there is a lingering sense that something essential is missing. The mind adapts to this discrepancy, softening emotions, editing words before they are spoken, regulating tone to avoid disruption. And in this quiet adjustment, the nervous system relaxes superficially, while the deeper self remains alert, scanning for signals that never fully arrive. The recognition of waiting is gradual. It arrives not as revelation, but as a gentle observation, noticing that time flows externally, while internally the self remains paused. Awareness often emerges in the smallest moments. A sigh held longer than usual, a glance that lingers on an empty chair, a fleeting thought of a someday that feels farther away with each passing year. These moments accumulate, layering quietly into the perception of life as a cycle of repetition, a subtle rhythm of unfulfilled longing. Reflection becomes unavoidable, and memories press closer than plans, the past heavier than the imagined future. Waiting is rarely chosen. It is learned. Initially, it appears as a pause, a chance to gather clarity, strength, or certainty. The mind frames stillness as preparation rather than avoidance. Yet over time, stillness becomes familiar, and comfort masks its cost. Goals are postponed with plausible reasons. Decisions deferred until conditions feel right. The future is mentally stored at a distance, where it cannot demand courage. The brain, seeking safety, resists movement when potential failure triggers internal alarms. Change feels disruptive. Even imagined risks activate the same neural pathways as real threats. The body remains regulated, but the self begins to shrink inside its own caution. Psychologically, this pattern transforms identity. One becomes still figuring things out, not ready yet, waiting for the right time. Labels that appear gentle conceal subtle weight. Movement begins to feel like loss. Not of material security, but of familiar rhythms of the story carefully constructed to maintain emotional balance. Beneath this lies a hidden grief, a mourning for the versions of self that remain unrealized, for paths not taken, not due to incapacity, but due to emotional risk. The mind extends the pause to protect against confronting this grief, and so time passes quietly, without resistance, without acknowledgement. This chapter reveals the subtle truth. Waiting persists not from lack of desire, but from the quiet fear of meeting oneself fully. One day becomes a mechanism of psychological survival. Hope is gently disguised as postponement. By imagining change later, discomfort in the present is softened. Temporal distancing becomes a strategy. The undefined future becomes a safe harbor where ambition need not meet action. Over months and years, desire is associated with delay. Wanting no longer drives movement. It drives contemplation. Plans are rehearsed mentally, but rarely translated into behavior. An internal split emerges. One part believes deeply in potential. Another learns to live as if that potential is optional. Each postponed action erodes self-trust, and the nervous system begins to absorb the quiet message. The inner life can wait indefinitely. The roots of this prolonged waiting often trace back to early experiences of uncertainty and subtle absence. In childhood, emotional attunement is rarely consistent. Needs are acknowledged only when convenient attention is given selectively, and emotional expression is rewarded unpredictably. The child learns to observe before expressing, to measure tone and feeling against the room's atmosphere. Authenticity becomes risky, not because it is punished, but because it is seldom met with resonance. From this, emotional self-silencing forms. Being quiet, being low need, becomes a strategy for safety. Over time, this strategy evolves seamlessly into adulthood, shaping a nervous system that is present externally, yet cautious internally. This internal caution fosters a paradoxical skill, heightened perceptiveness. The person becomes deeply attuned to others, noticing micro-expressions, emotional cues, and subtle shifts in mood. Relationships are navigated smoothly, conflicts avoided, conversations balanced. Yet this skill, born of survival, carries a cost. While the external persona appears emotionally mature and reliable, the inner self retreats. Connection is built on observation and regulation rather than mutual revelation. Emotional risks are minimized. Vulnerability is deferred indefinitely. The nervous system registers closeness with vigilance rather than ease. Presence is maintained, but resonance is scarce. Over time, this dynamic becomes normalized. Social fluency is maintained effortlessly, and the outside world perceives stability, consistency, and reliability. Internally, however, the individual feels quietly unaccompanied. The gap between external engagement and internal experience widens. The emotional self remains largely unexpressed, even in moments of apparent connection. Ordinary social interactions, once sources of energy, begin to drain subtly. The effort is not conscious. It is built into the rhythms of engagement. Listening becomes automatic, participation courteous yet contained. Inner thoughts are filtered, emotions softened, and authenticity reserved for the rarest moments, often only with oneself. Psychologically, this pattern is reinforced by repetition and subtle neural adaptation. The nervous system becomes conditioned to maintain a careful balance, monitoring social cues while suppressing personal needs. Connection is interpreted cognitively rather than emotionally. Relationships exist as structures of predictability rather than arenas of vulnerability. Over time, this equilibrium feels safe, familiar, and ultimately normal. Attempts to breach it feel uncomfortable, even threatening. The body relaxes when patterns are maintained. The mind conserves energy, avoiding the perceived risks of emotional exposure. Yet beneath this calm lies a quiet ache. The subtle fatigue of being emotionally present without being fully seen or held. This chapter illuminates the origins of the inner split. The part that desires true presence, resonance, and unfiltered connection, and the part that has learned to survive by adapting, observing, and minimizing. Both coexist, intertwined yet distinct, shaping behavior, thought, and emotional experience. Understanding this origin does not instantly resolve the tension, it reframes it. Recognition itself is a step toward reclaiming emotional agency, providing a foundation for the slow, gentle work of allowing the inner self to emerge without fear, judgment, or performance. It marks the first step toward bridging the divide between external life and internal experience, laying the groundwork for integration, authenticity, and eventual emotional presence. The psychological mechanisms behind prolonged waiting and emotional self-silencing are subtle, yet profound. Neuroscience reveals that when the brain experiences repeated uncertainty or inconsistent emotional responses, it adapts to minimize perceived risk. Neural circuits responsible for reward, motivation, and social cognition are calibrated towards safety rather than exploration.
Even imagined failure triggers threat responses similar to real danger, activating the amygdala and heightening vigilance. Over time, the nervous system becomes conditioned to associate emotional exposure with potential loss, while predictability, though less fulfilling, feels safe. The mind favors familiar routines, even if they dull vitality, because the cost of unguarded engagement is encoded deeply in the brain's survival networks. Temporal distancing is one of the most insidious consequences of this adaptation. The brain shifts desire into an undefined future, creating a mental rehearsal that substitutes for actual movement. Dreams and intentions are preserved cognitively but rarely acted upon physically. Plans are revisited repeatedly, yet the body does not follow. Motivation erodes, not from lack of aspiration, but because the neural system anticipates potential discomfort and subconsciously discourages action. Self-trust gradually diminishes under this pattern. Every postponed action sends a quiet message. I cannot fully rely on myself to follow through. Dopaminergic pathways, which respond to reward and novelty, begin to underreact to ordinary stimuli. The brain becomes habituated to predictable patterns, resulting in emotional undernourishment, even when life appears outwardly satisfying. Comfort in its subtlety becomes both reward and constraint. The nervous system experiences relief in stability, yet the self experiences a shrinking of possibilities, a soft erosion of courage and initiative. This is why fulfillment often fades not from impossibility, but from the very ease that promises safety. The psychological cost of prolonged comfort is often invisible. While outwardly functional, the inner self experiences a quiet dissonance, a tension between desire and action, between observation and presence. Emotional depth becomes something to manage privately rather than share openly. Vulnerability is postponed indefinitely, and authentic expression is regulated carefully. This learned rhythm shapes identity. One becomes highly competent, attentive, and relationally aware, yet increasingly distant from the spontaneous, unguarded self. Relationships exist, but resonance is scarce. Connection becomes informational rather than experiential, regulated rather than reciprocal.